In question number 8, I plotted the coordinates of the points L, U, and V, and it asks us to find the area of the triangle. So first of all, that means we need a base and a height, and then we'll divide by 2. So that's the area of a triangle formula. And what I need to do is look at the coordinates even though it's not on graph paper. So the first thing I notice is if I'm at L, which is 3, -4, and I go to 12, -4, notice the only thing that changes is the x value. And from 3 to 12, that's a total of 9 units. So that means the base is 9. Similarly, if we look at the other two coordinates, they show us that the x is 3, which stayed the same, but the y value went from -4 to 2. Well, from -4 to 2, that's a total of 6 units. You might have to put that on graph paper to count. So what we need to do is we need to find the area. So in our case, the area is just going to be 9 times 6 divided by 2. So the area is 54 divided by 2, which is 27. In number 9, they ask us to find the perimeter of a square, and they graphed it. Well, in order to do the perimeter, I need to know what the sides are. And they kind of did it very strange. This is at a slant, and I don't know how much that is. The best thing to do is if you can draw a triangle, you can always use the Pythagorean theorem. So the first thing I notice is I went from 6 over to 12, and that would be a length of 6 units in the x direction. The other one, I went from a 6 up to a 9. Well, 6 up to 9 would be 3 up. So if you do that, that'll help us find the hypotenuse using the Pythagorean theorem. I'll do that real quickly. So when I used the Pythagorean theorem, I got the square root of 45, which depending, you might have to break it down the way I did. So I did 9 times 5 is 45. The square root of 9 is 3. So this length right here is 3 square root of 5. Well, so is this side, because it's a square, and so is this side, and so is this side. So in order to find the perimeter, I'm going to add up all the sides. So 3 square root of 5 plus 3 square root of 5 plus 3 square root of 5 plus a 3 square root of 5 is kind of like 3x plus 3x plus 3x plus 3x. The total is 12, and you don't change the square root of 5. It just remains 12 square roots of 5. In number 10, they ask us to find the midpoint of CD given the two endpoints. Well, the best thing to do, I think, is to use the midpoint formula. That's probably the fastest, and then you don't have to graph anything. So I'm writing the midpoint formula for you real quickly. And basically I'm going to take the x-coordinate, which is 6, the other x-coordinate, which is a -1, and we need to find the average of those. So we add those together and divide by 2. And then the y values are a -4 plus 2, and I'll simplify that. So when I simplified, I got 5 over 2, and then over here I got -2 over 2, which is a -1. So either this top answer with the fractions okay, or the bottom. I kind of prefer the bottom just because I know what 2.5 means if I were graphing it. That means go between 2 and 3. So that's easier, but either answer is acceptable. In question number 11, they want us to find the slope of RS. And this one I'm going to graph real quickly. -3, 3 is right here. That's where R is. And 6, -5 is here. That's where S is. And now you have to be careful because there are a lot of different things we could be asked for. We could be asked for the length, and then we would do Pythagorean theorem. We could be asked for the midpoint, but they're asking for the slope. So hopefully you remember slope or inclination is always the rise over the run. And so I drew in a little right triangle to make it easier for me, and I'm just going to count straight down. That's 8 boxes. Over to the right is a total of 9 boxes. So my slope of RS is 8 over 9. The only thing is if you look at it, this is going downhill. If this was your money or you're sliding, this is going downhill. So that means our slope is actually -8 over 9. And positive 8 over 9 would be the wrong answer, so be very careful when it's positive or negative. In question number 12, they tell us ABCD is a square. And I actually like to look at it not on the graph paper. I like to look at it to the side over here. And they tell us ABCD, we can kind of go in almost any order we want as long as we go counterclockwise or clockwise. So there's ABCD. They told us the equation of line AD, that's this one, is y equals 4x plus 3. Now the next thing they tell us is they want us to find the equation of a line BC. Well, BC is this one. And hopefully you realize that AD and BC are parallel. And if they're parallel, then they have the same slope. And the slope of the first line is the number in front of x, so it's a positive 4. So that means the equation of this line also has to have a slope of positive 4 because they're parallel. Now the other thing they told us is that we know the coordinates of point C right here are negative 8, 4. So first I'm going to write the point slope formula down for you, and then I'm going to fill them in. So here's the equation of a line. It's not the normal one that you're used to looking at, but we use it in higher math, so that's why we're introducing it to you. So I know that m has to be 4, and that's because the two sides here again are parallel. So I know that I have to put a 4 here. And then the x and y stay the same, but the y one and the x one I'm going to replace with the x coordinate and the y coordinate. Notice the 8 here is a negative 8, but there's an extra negative, so it's actually 8x plus 8. And on the other side, the y is a 4, so you just put a 4 here. So one possible equation is y minus 4 equals 4 times x plus 8. Now if you don't like that equation, what you can do is you can actually distribute over and get it into the form you're used to looking at. So one equation again is this one, but if you want to multiply through, you can, and we'll accept either equation on your test. And the last step you would have to do after distributing is adding 4. So the other possible equation you could write is y equals 4x plus 16. In either case, notice that the slope is 4, and that was because in the original equation, the other line that we're looking at, slope AD, notice that is also parallel, so they have to have the same slope. Question number 13 tells us that Muggs is a rectangle. So I'm just going to draw a sample of what that looks like real quickly. You could put it on graph paper, but I think it's just as easy to see it this way. So MUGS is a rectangle. So remember that means we have 90-degree angles. They tell us that the equation of MU is this one right here. So y equals negative 1/3 x plus 2. And what they want us to find is they want us to find the slopes of all the other sides. Well, hopefully you realize that if MU is part of a rectangle, SG would have to be parallel. So if it's parallel, it's going to have the exact same slope as MU. So SG has to have a slope of negative 1/3, and that's because they're parallel. Now the other side is UG and MS are actually perpendicular to the original one. And when you want perpendicular, you want the opposite reciprocal slope. And the opposite of a negative is a positive, and the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3/1. So that would mean that the slope of UG is 3/1, and the same thing would be for MS. So in question 14, they tell us given segment SJ with the endpoints -1, 2, which I plotted the S, and 5, 11 is J. They want us to find the coordinates of a point R. so that the ratio from S to R and then R to J is in a 1:2 ratio, which basically means one segment and two segments. So the important part is whenever you have a ratio like that, you need to know the total number of parts. And in our case, there are going to be 3 parts. The first thing that I like to do is I like to draw a triangle, a right triangle, connecting, and you can either go, that's a little too far, and then I try and find the rise and run to figure out how far. So in our case, I'm going from a -1 to a 5, so this would be 6 units over. And I'm going from a 2 up to an 11, so that's 9. And since I know that there are 3 parts, what I do is I divide both of these by 3. So that means I'm going to rise 3. And I also divide this part by 3, which means my run is going to be 2. So what I do is I start at one of the segments, and I'm going to go down 3 and over 2 and put a dot right there. So down 3 over 2, there's one of my connections. Down 3 again, over 2, down 3 again, over 2, kind of like a scale. And once I do that, I see that this segment has 1, 2, 3 equal parts now. So what they were asking me for is they're asking me to find the point so that S to R, so here's S, and R to J is supposed to be in a 1:2 ratio. So if I put R right there, that will be in a 1:2 part ratio. So the coordinates of R would be at this point right here, which was at over 1 and up 5. So 1, 5. It should be a little easier on your graph paper. In question 15, they want us to write the equation of a circle, and they give us the center, and then they tell us the diameter is 8. So remember, in a circle, if the diameter, that's all the way across, is 8, then the radius is only 4. So our equation would be x, and remember you do the opposite, so since that's a -4, you put +4 squared, and it's a lot like the Pythagorean theorem, plus y, and since that's a 3, you put a -3 squared, and then you also square the radius. So 16 would be 4 squared. Question number 16, they want the equation of a parabola. And so I wrote the vertex formula right here in green. And now basically similar to a circle, we're going to substitute the information in. So this would become x, and it's a minus because it's the opposite of a +2, squared. And then they told us the p-value is 3. So all I do is plug in 3 right there, and you get 12, because that's 4 times p. And then it's going to be y, but then it's going to be a +5, because it's the opposite of a -5. In question number 19, the first thing they show us is this equation up here. And they want to know, is this equation a circle or a parabola? And since both the x is squared and the y is squared, this is a circle. When only one of them is squared, then it's a parabola. So since both the x is squared and the y is squared, it is a circle. Now they want us to rewrite it in standard form, so I'm going to copy it down here, but I'm going to rearrange things. I'm going to put the x's together, so I just brought the 6x over. I'm going to leave a little space. I'm going to put the y's together. And on the other side we have the number 11. Now hopefully you've learned that to complete the square, you look at this middle number, you cut that number in half. Half of 6 is 3, and then you square that number. So right here you put a +9. On the other side you have to keep things consistent, so you also have to put a +9. For the next one, we have to take half of 8, which is 4. 4 squared, so 4 squared is 16. So we put +16 on this side and 16 on the other side. And then you have completed squares. So hopefully you've practiced this in class, and you know that this becomes x plus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared, and that equals 36 when you add all of these numbers together. Now it's in standard form, and once we have that, we can identify the center, which will be at the opposite of these two, so it'll be at -3, +4, and the radius will be 6. That's the square root of 36. Somehow I forgot to do number 17, so let's go back to that one. 17 says, does the point 99 lie on the circle with this equation? Well, one way to do it is to try and graph it and see if the points are actually on it. An easier way is to just substitute in a 9 for x, a 9 for y, and see if we get 169. So I'm going to do 9 minus 4 squared, plus the y value is also 9 in this case. And then I'm going to figure that out for you real quickly. So when I did that, I got 5 squared, because 9 take away 4 squared is 5 squared. 9 plus 3 is 12 squared. When you square them, you get 25 plus 144, so that's 169, and that does equal 169. So the answer is yes, and that's because when you substitute it in, it worked in the equation. If you had gotten a number like 111 equaled 169, then that would be silly because they're not equal. So the answer to that question would have been no. Question number 18 is similar to question number 16, using the equation of a parabola. So again, we need that vertex form. And if you look at the equation earlier, you should see that it's an x, and it's the opposite of -2, so 2 squared, equals, and it's always 4 times the p-value. So in our case, p is -4, so that would mean it would be a -16 right here. And then it's y minus 6, and that's because this is a +6. So look back at the other equation.